Let's kick on now with a supersized panel. I've got Nick Cater from the Menzies Research Institute, Caroline DeRusso, of course, the Royal Report host, filling in the late debate this week too, and also Christy McSweeney, Managing Director of PR Council, joining us from Melbourne. Thanks for all being on board. I've got to start off on this misinformation, disinformation thing, this censorship stuff. Nick, I'll start with you because you wrote about this in The Australian this morning. This is a worry. More government censorship, not less.
That's right. And you're giving it to a government agency which was set up to share out the spectrum for free-to-air broadcasters. That was its job when it was set up in 2005, I think. And now it's going to become the official censor of the internet. I mean, worried? I am. I'm very worried about this. And I think we need to make a fuss, stop this legislation going through.
I think you're dead right. We've got to make a fuss. Christy McSweeney, you've been around media and politics for a long, long while. Have you ever seen governments seeking more power to censor us after we've just been through 3 years of undeclared censorship during the pandemic?
Well, after people were arrested in their pyjamas in their kitchen, Chris, for posting something that they hadn't even done, that they were thinking about doing, absolutely. Look, this is really interesting. I can see the government is trying to tighten the reins on the tech companies, and they're being forced through that with parents, with schools, with cyberbullying, with online harm to kids. But beginning this process by trying to police the media is the wrong place in which to start, pulling in the reins of tech companies and social platforms. I think they should start with the harm it does to children and moderating the internet with harmful content to kids. That would be a much better way of going about it. And who adjudicates?
Yeah,
what's appropriate and what's not appropriate?
That is crucial. Now, Caroline, we know there's lots of horrible, nasty stuff on social media, but handing control over to governments is not the way to tackle it, surely.
No, it's not. And the thing is, despite what governments like to think of themselves, they're not that bright, like as a general rule, and they don't get it right all the time. And I'm particularly uncomfortable of living in a world where it's illegal to say something the government doesn't agree with, because that's ultimately where we get to. And that there is a great worry for a good number of things. Look at just what happened all through COVID and the number of things that have now come to light, which we weren't, what we were told at the time wasn't right.
We were certainly fed misinformation. In some respects, we were blatantly lied to by governments and bureaucrats, and yet we've got the government now running around saying this sort of stuff.
I think it was a really good thing that the Australian government, whether it be a coalition
censored people's freedom of speech,
provided factual, science-based information.
Yeah, that's the Labor Party justifying the censorship of social media during the pandemic. That happened under the coalition, don't forget. The coalition started it, Labor continued on with it and has defended it. But now, in their push to get more power, here's what the Prime Minister and others are saying.
Misinformation.
Misinformation.
Misinformation. The misinformation which is there.
Some misinformation.
Spread misinformation.
Yeah, Christy, this goes to your point. Who decides what's misinformation? Who is the arbiter of truth in this?
Well, who adjudicates? I mean, currently, the social media platforms, fact checkers, are people employed by the social media platforms. They're not independent of them. If that model is followed by the Australian government, or if it's done in partnership with the social media platforms, we're just going to get people who've simply applied for a job be the adjudicators, essentially public servants. We have a body of laws in this country in terms of what's harmful, what's offensive, what's considered hate speech. And sometimes, while we would all think that's pretty cut and dried, that's a really contested space, and we know that. So I'm really looking towards how is the government going to ensure that this is not a contested space in terms of what's information and what's not.
Yeah. Now, Nick, we know during the pandemic now that there was this secret censorship over pandemic discussion. Now, that should be chilling to everyone in this country. No one seems concerned about it. But under these proposed laws, you're talking about economic issues, environmental issues. How much power could a government have over public debate if it's deciding what's truthful and what's misinformation?
All it has to decide is that something is harmful.
Yep.
And it's saying that a harmful thing can include harm to the environment, harm to the economy. you can see how they'll just drive a coach and horses through that, don't they? You get up and you say something that's not quite, the official line on climate change, and you're in the dock for this. It really is chilling, and I think that COVID showed us just how bad it can be, even in a liberal society like us, when the bureaucrats take charge and when Parliament no longer has oversight. And this is where we're heading here.
That's the problem, isn't it, Caroline? If I get up here and say that whatever Australia does, it'll make no difference to the global climate, which is factually defendable, but they'll try and shut you down from saying that. They'll say that's misinformation.
Of course, because it's politically inconvenient. And the issue also under the legislation is the government is exempt from the legislation.
Yes.
So everyone else...
Otherwise they wouldn't be able to talk.
Correct.
Every time they're opening their mouths, it's misinformation.
Minor issue. So everyone else has to be policed by this legislation except them. And they don't have to be policed by it, but no one is allowed to oppose them because then that will be the misinformation. I mean, it would be funny. If this was Yes Minister, this would be hilarious, but it's actually really quite terrifying.
It is terrifying.